Hello all, welcome to our channel, where we bring you the most entertaining, intriguing, and thought-provoking tales from the vast world of Reddit. Today we are going to dive deep into 3 stories. So let's begin. Story number 1. Am I the A-word for telling my mom that I regret wasting my youth for her? I, 26F, was raised by a single mother. My mother always told me that my father had abandoned us and that he never loved us, and she always stressed that she had to work twice as hard to have a daughter. For some reason those comments always made me feel like everything was my fault, and sometimes I felt like my mother would have been better off if I didn't exist. When I turned 16, my mother was seriously ill, breast cancer. At that time, we were living in a rented house and the owner had asked for it. At that moment I found out that my mother had not paid the bills or the rent. Mom couldn't work, so I had to leave school and start working. The first year was hard. I ate very little. It was more coffee than anything. The chemo, the work, everything was very exhausting. Even so, I never regretted taking care of my mother. I felt like it was the least I could do after she sacrificed everything for me. After a while, my mother overcame cancer and I decided to resume my mandatory studies. At first, my mother did not agree. She told me things like, "It is humiliating that you finish your studies when I was never able to do so because I had to take care of you." At first I thought his words made sense, but my boyfriend encouraged me to finish them. Now this last year my boyfriend has encouraged me to go to university. He even told me that I could take out a loan to pay for university and put him as executor. He has a very good salary. When I raised the idea with my family, everyone was happy except my mother, who made me feel bad again. I told him that this was my decision and I wanted to study because I wanted to get better opportunities. This time my mother accused my boyfriend of putting absurd ideas in my head, that I was only going to get into debt in vain because I was no good for my studies and I most likely left them halfway like I have done with everything in my life. I reminded her to never leave something abandoned of my own free will, but she reminded me that I left school because I was stupid. That's when I reminded her that I did it because she needed me. She said so many hurtful things at that moment. She told me that she never needed me, that I only extorted her, that she preferred to die before I took care of her. That's when I broke out and told her that I regretted having taken care of her all those years and that I no longer wanted her in my life. My boyfriend says I was right to vent, but I feel like I was very cruel to her and my family also thinks I was cruel. I don't know what to do. Maybe I should apologize. It's the only family I have, but I feel like I'm hurt a lot. Update number 1. I have returned here to tell you a little about what has happened these months. After the fight with my mother, I decided to move in with my boyfriend. During the time I lived with my mother, I took care of the expenses, such as electricity, water, food and rent. I told my mother that I would help her for 2 months while she looked for a job and then she would have to fend for herself, but I decided to cut that agreement after finding out that she did a horrible thing. I talked to my partner about what I said here, and he agreed with some of your comments about my mom being a narcissist and that she had done something to make my father leave us. You were right. I tried to investigate. It was difficult since no one wanted to give me an answer. Until my mother's sister, who is a little interested, offered to take me to someone who might know about my father, in exchange for money. Finally she contacted me with a sister of my father and I was able to meet him. He was happy to hear from me. Our first conversation was via video call. I discovered that my father always paid money to my mother for me and that he sent me gifts at Christmas and birthdays, gifts that my mother passed off as coming from her. I also found out that he is married and I have a 16-year-old brother and an 8-year-old sister, and he also invited me to his wedding. When I asked him how he met my mother, he told me a pretty horrible story. They met on my father's sister's birthday. It should be noted that my mother was 20 and my father was 16. My mother got my father drunk and then they had sex. He doesn't remember much about that night, because he deleted that horrible memory from his mind. She became pregnant after that night. My maternal grandparents demanded that he marry my mother, but he disliked her. In the end my paternal grandparents demanded a DNA test and if I was his daughter, he would be financially responsible. But nothing more. He did get to know me, but he didn't want to marry my mother. he couldn't even see her. She harassed him and demanded a wedding. In the end, when I was 4 months old, my mother gave him an ultimatum: either marry her or forget about his daughter. He couldn't imagine being with a woman like that and told him that he would take care of me, but it couldn't be anything from her. My mother decided to leave the city and cut all ties with him until I was 1 year old and had a lot of debt. Then she told him that she would send him photographs of me in exchange for paying my expenses. He accepted, and for years he asked to see me, but he refused. He could only see me in photos. After talking, I understood the whole situation. I asked him if we could meet face to face. He accepted. I planned to visit him at his house and thus meet his entire family. When I found out all this, I cut off all financial aid to my mother. She came to my house and demanded that I pay the bills. I told her that she had seen me with my father and that now I knew what kind of woman she was. That drove her crazy and she tried to hit me, but my boyfriend quickly took her out of our house. I didn't see her again until the day I was going to travel to meet my father. She called me crying, saying that her cancer had come back. I thought for a few moments that she was telling me the truth, and I almost went to her house, but my boyfriend was smarter and he told me that before believing him I should call the doctor who treated her before. I did exactly that and discovered that it wasn't true. I simply sent a message to my mom telling her not to come back to look for me, and I blocked her from everywhere. I finally met my father. We talked and cried a lot. His wife was very kind to me and so were his children. He showed me all the photos he had of me and the letters he wrote to me, but she sent him back. I still don't know how to face all this. I just know that I don't want to see my mother again. P.S. I applied for some universities. I await a response. If everything goes well, I will study pedagogy, my dream since I was very little. So now, let's move forward to story number 2. AITA for not telling my GF I was gonna break up with her if she went on vacation. Male friends. Basically, my GF went on vacation with her male friends. I told her this made me uncomfortable and didn't want her to go. By the way, she used to hook up with one of them before she met me. She told me it'd be fine and that they are like brothers to her. I already made the decision to break up with her right then and there, but I wanted to get my stuff from her place before anything, and I figured I should do that while she's gone. I also didn't want to break up over text or call, so I waited for her to come back. I picked her up when she came back, dropped her off, and gave her the key to her place back and broke up. She started crying, and she figured out it was because of the vacation. She kept saying that nothing happened. I told her she knew I wasn't comfortable with this, and she still went. She mentioned that I should have said that I'd break up with her if she went, and that if she knew she'd never would have gone. I told her I didn't want to be controlling and threatened her with ending the relationship. We kept going back and forth over this for a while. Edit. A lot of y'all are assuming an awful lot here. Most of you are cool, but to give you a bit more context. She never actually introduced me to these friends. Even though I mentioned I wanted to meet them. She kept making excuses. She never told me she used to hook up with her friend. I only found out because I found an old pic of them kissing when she was showing me some old travel pics. I was okay with their friendship until now. This was just too much for me. Most of y'all are cool, but I swear, some of y'all act like cheaters don't exist. Did she cheat on me? Who knows? But at this point I was sick of doubting. So now, let's move forward to story number 3. AITA for leaving the same day that I moved in, with my BF. Did I overreact here? So I have been dating Matt, 26, for a little over a year. We knew each other 2 years prior to dating and we got along really well. I have a son, 2.5, and a daughter, 4, who he had already met from multiple times when I was with the friend group. Here's the thing though. We just got a place together, but the place needed work before we could move in. So we agreed with the landlord that we would help fix it up with him, landlord, to get half off the first month's rent. He agreed. So for a month we were there every day cleaning this place up, and I started noticing some red flags. like a quick temper. But I literally just assumed it was because the AC wasn't working and it was like a sauna in the house. So he was pouring sweat and getting pissed off. But again, I thought it was because he was hot. Because as soon as he cooled off, he was fine again. But we finished the house. The AC was working again, so it was no longer hot. We moved in yesterday morning. He was barking orders basically all day to me. Like telling me where to put things, or if I put something somewhere he didn't like, he was all, "Why would you put that there?" And literally looked at me like I was stupid. Like the, "Are you serious?" look. But I let it slide because I didn't really know what else to do, I guess. Or every 15 minutes he was asking me to go with him to Walmart because he wanted to blow a bunch of money on stuff to make the place feel like home. We hadn't even unpacked half of our stuff either. Got irritated when I said I didn't think we should spend more money right now. But anyways, I go and pick up my kids and stuff for dinner. I grabbed a family pack of kielbasa, the one that has 3.5 strips, and rice. Well, I only cut up 2 of the kielbasa because that's literally plenty. He comes over and says, "Why aren't you making all of it?" So I told him I didn't need to make all of it and that this would feed all of us and still be enough for leftovers, and made a comment about how I was going to use the rest of the kielbasa that I wasn't cooking to feed my kids and myself the next day because I like kielbasa sandwiches. He blew up. Thankfully the kids weren't inside to hear it. My mom came over and brought them to the park across the street. He told me there was no way that it would feed all of us and that I was selfish for only thinking about what I would eat tomorrow instead of worrying about feeding us all tonight. Walked out and slammed the door after I said, "Are you really blowing up on me about food right now?" I watched him drive off. Well, I immediately started taking me and the kids' stuff out to the car and had my mom leave with my kids. I get everything loaded up before he gets back. Most of my stuff is in storage still. Well, I got a text from him about 25 minutes after I left saying, "Did you really leave? Please come back and talk to me. I'm sorry. I'm having such a bad day and I'm just exhausted from working and doing the repairs here. You shouldn't have left this." Etc. etc. AITA. Edit. I truly don't have the energy to argue with salty-ass toxic masculinity men. I work full-time. I'm not leeching Matt's money. I bought the food with MY money. It was half of MY money that went into getting us in the house. I literally work full-time at a bank. He had work the next day, I did not. Therefore he wouldn't have been home to eat the leftover kielbasa with me and my kids, and therefore, no, I didn't include him in it. That's all for today, folks. See you tomorrow.